I have a lot of orchids to repot, so I figured I could either do it alone or I could do it with you. We're gonna pot orchids together with you, and you can see how it all works, because sometimes it's not so straightforward, and you can kind of look and see what the different considerations are that I think about when I repot orchids. I'm going to do 4 Phalaenopsis and 3 Paphiopedilums. I'm going to start out with this little orchid. It has been struggling for a while. So it was in a little plastic sleeve. I removed the sleeve, which is actually really, really helpful when you have a little orchid that is potted in sphagnum moss and it has a little plastic sleeve. If you remove it, then it helps the orchid to have a lot more ventilation and the roots to have a lot more ventilation, and it's not so soggy. But it's been like this for a while, so I soaked it in this little cup of water so that the sphagnum moss would kind of loosen up, but it really needs to be repotted. So I have this big bin right here, and I'll put all the mess in here. And I should have repotted it a while ago. So right now, today, this is kind of catch-up time on orchids that should have been potted a while ago. I want to pot it in this little pot right here. It's a little orchid with very few roots. So the first thing I want to do is I want to sterilize my shears. That's just my kitchen torch, and it keeps from passing pathogens, particularly viruses, between orchids. So that leaf just came off. Okay, here's the little orchid, and I have this potting mix right here. It's from Repot Me. It's a special potting mix that's formulated specifically for Phalaenopsis orchids. So the main thing that it has is some long fibered sphagnum moss that can be really good for Phalaenopsis orchids because it has a lot of water retention, and it also has bark. Okay, so it's kind of a combination to keep it so that it is a little bit, has some water retention, and it also has a nice open mix at the same time, kind of take advantage of the best of both worlds. So what I'm going to do is just take some potting mix. I'm just going to press it down around the sides. There we go. This is what I call way past due. So you want to kind of make it so it's nice and secure in the pot. So one little baby Phalaenopsis all potted up and ready to become a happier orchid. Okay. So this, I've also been soaking it so that I can take it apart easier. I'm going to sterilize my shears one more time. So this was potted up as a kokedama, and kokedamas last about a year before they need to be repotted again. The sphagnum moss starts to break down, and this sphagnum moss has definitely outlived its usefulness. So I'm just going to cut it out. And pot. So a lot of times I don't like to use, unless it's a kokedama, I don't really like to use sphagnum moss as a primary potting material. I think it works best usually, most of the time, as a supplemental component. I used fishing line to make the kokedama, and it's all over the place. So what I'm cutting is the fishing line. So what I like to do when I make a kokedama is put something in the center so that it stays a little bit hollow, keeps the roots that are in the middle from getting too wet. So I'm not cutting the roots, I'm just cutting the fishing line. Sphagnum moss also has some antibacterial properties when it's fresh, so that's another good thing about it. So this was inside, like I said, and it just kind of kept the center of the kokedama from becoming too waterlogged and wet. This fishing line is kind of a mess. So yeah. Another thing that you can do with kokedamas is instead of using fishing line, you can use like hemp rope or something, and it does break down over time, but after a while the roots kind of hold the kokedama together anyway, so you don't really need all the fishing line. This is kind of a mess. I don't know, you probably can't tell because the fishing line is clear, but it is all over the place. Okay, so this has been in a kokedama for too long. So if you ever do a kokedama, they do really, really well the first year, and then the sphagnum moss breaks down, and then they don't do so well after that. So take it from my bad example that you should pot up a repot a kokedama right away. So I think what I'm going to use is this. It seems to fit in here pretty good. So I'm going to use this potting mix again from Repot Me, because I think the sphagnum moss will be nice for this orchid because of the holes and stuff. It's going to dry out pretty quickly. So I want to get a bit more of the sphagnum moss, and I just have it over here. This is the Repot Me. So Becky, you can stay as long as you want. I have like 6 orchids to do, so don't. So however long you have is, I will appreciate every moment that you're here, but don't feel obligated. Okay, I'm just moistening the sphagnum moss, and for the very center, I'm going to avoid the sphagnum moss, and I'm going to do more of the bark stuff because I don't want it to be soggy in the middle. But around the the outside edges is more where I'm going to put the sphagnum moss. And I want this to kind of sit low in the pot. So I'm going to give it a little twirl to kind of get those roots down in there. So one thing that's really nice about the Repot Me sphagnum moss is it's very long fibered, and that's the highest quality. You want it pretty secure in the pot. So I'm just going to keep adding and adding till it's nice and firm. It's really nice to have, so I have the big bin right here, and then I have the smaller bin in there, and it makes it really nice because I can unpot on this side and repot on this side and contain the mess at the same time. Okay, so there we go. Orchid number 2, all potted up. I have another Kokedama. I hope you don't mind if I do another one, because it has desperately needed potting. Back to the sanitation. Sanitation might seem like an unnecessary, boring step, but it's actually can really prevent you from growing sick orchids. So, sanitation is queen. And this one does not have the little cat toy inside. It has the wiffle ball. So if you like to play pickleball or anything, then you might have some of these around your house. It can be really helpful. So I think having 2 orchids that were potted Kokedama style, one had the little cat toy in, and this one has the bigger wiffle ball. And I think the one with the bigger wiffle ball did better. So if you ever want to do a Kokedama, I would recommend using the larger wiffle ball over the smaller cat toy. I think it's because the Kokedama was not so thick, and it allowed the roots to get a little bit more air. Okay, there we go. It's a little bit better than the last one, but not a whole lot. Okay, so let's just see which pot will fit the roots the best. I kind of like, so these ones are also from Repot Me, by the way. They're just a little bit sturdier. These ones are a little taller and narrower. But, so let's see. So when you pot an orchid and you choose the pot that you want to use, always choose it based on root volume, not the size of the plant. So these ones should have been potted a while ago, so they don't have the best root systems. Okay, so here we go, and it's the Repot Me Phalaenopsis mix, which is nice because it's bark-based with sphagnum moss, and it also has some of the leca clay pellets and the sponge rock. So just start adding it in. The advantage of these clear pots is you can see the roots, you can see when it needs to be watered. They hold more moisture. If you're growing your orchids inside and it's dry, you don't have a lot of humidity, and if you're just learning and you want to be able to see your roots, then the clear pots, I think, are really the way to go. But they're not the only way. So I'll pot another orchid in a different type of pot so you can see that there's more than one way to do this. I'm going to do something. I'm going to put a little bit in the bottom. Okay. Try again, right? And if you turn the pot one way and the orchid another way, it helps the roots to wrap nicely inside the pot. Just keep kind of turning it and the roots will lay better inside the pot. Okay, here we go again. So I think these two former kokedamas will be very happy to get a nice fresh potting mix. I hope one of the things that you see is that there's more than one way to do something, because these orchids did spectacularly as kokedamas. I should have repotted them sooner, but they'll also be fine this way in this new potting mix. I want it to be pretty secure in the pot. You can wear gloves if you want to. Sphagnum moss can have stickers in it. So, and you can get slivers from the bark, but I like to wear gloves when I wash dishes, but not when I pot my orchids. Okay, pretty secure. Okay, so that's 3 down. This is one that I tried to pot in the pot from Planter Homa. So these are the self-watering pots, but it's just, see how narrow the base is? The base of this orchid is pretty thick. So I am going to pot it in a different pot. This was the pot that it was in originally, and I'm going to put it in this terracotta pot. So what you need to know about terracotta is, number one, it wicks moisture away from the pot. I'm going to add a little bit of extra sphagnum moss to this one because I know that the roots are going to dry out a little bit more and the roots are going to stick to this pot. They're just going to be like that, glue themselves to the pot. Here is the potting mix from Repot Me. Just going to add more sphagnum moss because I know that the sphagnum moss is going to be more necessary. So when I potted this earlier, so I've unpotted this earlier today, and I filled up the inside with the wood-based potting mix, but now I'm going to put sphagnum moss kind of around the outside because I don't want it to dry out too quick with the terracotta. So everything's flexible, everything's customizable, and this pot is deep enough for the orchid, so that's nice too. And some of the bark. There's different sizes of bark based on the thickness of your roots. If you have thicker roots, you want larger pieces of bark. And if you have smaller, finer orchid roots, then you'd use a potting mix with smaller pieces of bark. This is not exactly center, but that's okay. Okay, I can fill a hole with my hand. So, okay, I have another potting mix right here that's bark based, and I'm just gonna put some down in that hole. Number 2. So hopefully there's a nice combination of the sphagnum moss and the bark so that it will be well draining, but yet keep enough moisture to the roots that it will continue to be happy. When this orchid blooms, the flowers have just this iridescent, sparkly pink flower. It's so pretty. So very excited for this orchid. Okay, here we go. It's another one. So this is a slipper orchid, or you can do Paphiopedilum or Phalaenopsis orchids with this mix, and it is from Repot Me again. And the reason I got this special mix is because I've been having trouble with my Paphs and Frags. And the reason, I believe, it's been too cold in the room in the winter time. So that is something I'm going to do differently this year. I've got a little seed mat, and I'm going to put them on my seed mat in the winter time, and I hope that is what's going to make the difference. So these Paphiopedilums, they're all the Madier type. They have the speckled leaves, and they're a little bit easier to grow than the strap leaf variety. They don't require quite as much light. So that is the story with these. That over here. Okay, I'm gonna probably reuse the same pots. Yeah, I don't even know how this orchid's alive, but it is. So I'm gonna set it back in here. And so each time, this is the rhizome. It is not happy, but I'm not gonna throw it away. But so it has a little rhizome right here, and it grows along this rhizome bit by bit, and that's where the new flowers come out of each little fan of leaves. So it's a very sad orchid, but it's still alive, and I'm hoping that the new temperature that I'm going to give it this winter will be the golden ticket. So one thing to know about growing orchids is just because it's an easy orchid for many people to grow doesn't mean it'll necessarily be an easy orchid for you to grow, because we all have different growing conditions. So you might be a dendrobium grower or a Phalaenopsis grower or whatever. So just don't feel bad. But if it's not your orchid. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down the date here. And so there's a little slot right here, and I can see each time I've repotted it. So we'll see. Is this what this orchid needs? Nice fresh potting mix and some warmer temperatures. Hopefully that will be it. All right, now we have this one. And again, it just does not look like it's up to much. Has some dead leaves. I'm going to cut out. Yeah, it also feels dry. And I water it. I feel like I water it all the time. So if someone is a pro with Paphiopedilums and you have some suggestions for me, I am a willing learner. So these are sympodial orchids, again, meaning that they grow along a rhizome, but they don't have water storage. So they do like their potting mixes to be somewhat damp. So here's the rhizome right here. So when I was talking to someone that is really good at paths, they did say that they are keeping their rhizome up a little bit higher. So I'm going to pull that up a little bit. They said they are keeping their rhizome from getting too buried. So we'll see if that helps too. Okay. So this potting mix, it looks like it's bark and leca clay pellets and sponge rock. That's what I can see just by looking at it. This little slipper orchid, if it's happy and healthy, it can grow multiple flowers at the same time. Another thing about slipper orchids is they're not too picky about when you pot them. Some people say you can pot them while they are in flower. And they are also semi-terrestrial, so they like to grow on the forest floor, kind of in leaf litter. But there is something about my house that they just don't seem to really like. So I know it's not light because I can bloom dendrobiums and cattleyas just fine, but these little slipper orchids have given me a run for my money. And last but not least, maybe I'm just not giving them enough water. Okay. There we go. Trim off some of these dead leaves. Someone told me with they have a Maxarilia tenuifolia. So you can see two little fans right here. And they have it kind of sitting in a little dish of water. And I wonder if that would be too much. So if you enjoy repotting, you should get some slipper orchids because they do not mind the process, apparently. There it is. Special potting mix from Repot Me. Hopefully that helps me to be more successful, but I think I'll really know if I've been successful a year from now. They'll have survived another winter. I can let you know if it was the warmer temperatures and possibly the potting mix that helped it. And hopefully my slipper orchids will be more successful in the future, but I think that for sure the Phalaenopsis orchids will bloom for me in the spring after they have their cool down in the winter, trigger some blooming, and I think that they'll be good to go. I am glad that I remembered about this orchid because I do need to repot it. So I'm going to add some more sphagnum moss because on the Planter Homa webpage, they used all sphagnum moss. I don't want to use all sphagnum moss myself. Here's the orchid. It needs to be repotted. Has nice, fat, healthy roots. So this is what an orchid looks like. You don't wait to repot it. Okay, they do these funny little things in the center. They look like they're made out of coconut fiber. I'm going to dig that out. There we go. So this one is good because my other orchids were they were just too big for the pot. So we decided in the other garden party that one of our suggestions was going to be to have different sizes of pots instead of just the one. And then our other recommendation with the planter homas would be to have some instructions in the pot to know what to do, or even just like a link to the website. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And I think it will fit quite nicely. So just in case someone that watches this video hasn't ever done this before, these planter homa pots, they're a self-watering pot, and we're experimenting with them. They have this thread right here. So you thread it up through a hole in the bottom and then down, and then it wicks moisture up to the orchid. So that's how it works. I'm gonna kind of turn it so it sits nicely down into the pot. Spread some roots so they're kind of around that cone that's in the bottom of the pot. Okay. Now I'm going to start filling it up. And it's a mix of sphagnum moss and bark, has some leca. So I've noticed the Repot Me mix has sponge rock, horticulture charcoal, and even some cork. But it's mostly bark and sphagnum moss. And this is a high quality sphagnum moss because look how long these fibers are. So that's a good thing. In the video on the Planter Homa website, they put some sphagnum moss right around the bottom like that. So maybe I'll do that. So, and then there we go. Yeah, this orchid is a good size for this pot. The other one that we put into the terracotta pot was just a little too big. So, nice advantage of a clear pot is you can see the roots nicely. And these are pretty sturdy. The plastic is nice and sturdy, so that's nice too. Nice and secure. And then here is the pot. So there's this string right here. And it hangs, put it down in the pot. And then there is a hole right here that you pour water into. Let me lift it up. So there's a hole right here. So then when I pour the water, I can pour it right through that hole right there. And then right here, there's a little window with a hole. So you can't overfill the pot. So what you do is you just pour water down into this hole. Then when water starts to come out, then you know it's too full. Okay, so water's starting to dribble out the little hole. So you'd always want to set these on a coast, like a little dish or something. This one fits well. The first one I tried to pot in here. So this one the roots were too big, especially at the bottom. It was too wide. It wouldn't fit into the narrow base, but this one is just the right size. Orchid beds will be the perfect place for the Orchid Homa experiment, all trying it together in about the same time. So we'll be able to see how our orchids do with the pot over a long period of time.